Hello and welcome to my channel Malavika's Magic. Today I'll be sharing with you my views on barriers in the process of communication part 2. So in this video I'll be dealing with intrapersonal or psychological barriers. So let us begin by understanding these barriers. So the barriers which occur in the mind of either the sender or the receiver are called as intrapersonal or psychological barriers. So there are various types of barriers. One could be the categorical thinking. The second could be the wrong assumptions. The third, varied perceptions. The fourth, differing background. The fifth, wrong inferences. And the sixth, impervious categories or close-mindedness. So let us discuss in detail all these type of barriers. So we'll start with wrong assumptions. The assumptions, as we all know, are based on information that has not been proved. And so this information is inaccurate, therefore it is inaccurate. So let us take some examples so that we understand, how these assumptions could be very, very dangerous in the process of communication. So for example, the concept of white versus black in mourning. Now, in India, we generally you wear white dress when we go for mourning. It could be a white sari, it could be a white kurta pajama, or in any other form, we tend to wear white clothes, when we go for mourning. But this is not applicable to all countries. In most of the countries, they wear black when they go for mourning. So the our views on white clothes could be based on inappropriate information. So when we assume that, when all people should wear white, it is inappropriate because we are not trying to find out that people come from different background. And so therefore, there could be cultural variations, and we should be aware of those cultural variations. And without being aware of these cultural variations, when we try to make these assumptions that white is the only color for mourning, that could be absolutely inappropriate, and it could be a misleading statement. And this could hamper the process of communication. Now, let us take another example. When the sender is communicating with the receiver, the sender actually tends to observe the nonverbal signals of the receiver. And this nonverbal signals could be misleading at times. So if the sender is not aware or does not give importance to the fact that this nonverbal signals could have different meanings, could actually assume that the receiver understands his or her information or accept his or her views only by observing the nodding of the head of the receiver. So this could be absolutely misleading, and the sender may not be aware of it, and thus it could lead to miscommunication in the process. Then let us take another example, the communication between the doctor and the patient. When the doctor is communicating with the patient, the doctor tends to assume that the patient understands certain information that normally a doctor writes in the prescription, or is aware of all the instruction that the doctor writes in the prescription. So that may not be the case because the background of the patient is totally different from that of the doctor. And the doctor, without gathering complete information about the background, the receiver assumes that the receiver or the patient understands whatever he has written in his prescription, and this could lead to miscommunication in the process. Now, let us take another example, that we normally tend to believe that the person sitting next to us is always in a better off position. Again, this may not be the case all the time, because this assumption is again based on inappropriate or inadequate information, and it is not based on factual information. So after collecting the factual information, it might be proved otherwise that the person sitting next to us may not be in a better off position, might be in a position worse than what we are in. So these wrong assumptions can lead to misunderstanding between the sender and the receiver. And so therefore it is necessary for the sender or the receiver to identify what is going on in their mind, to give a deep thought to what is going on in their mind when they are engaged in the process of communication. Now let us move on to the second barrier, that is varied perceptions. So these varied perceptions, we all know are based on certain factors. So our perception basically are based on factors like experience, that is observation around us, then the values that we tend to learn, or exposed to right from a childhood, and of course our attitude towards, our values or the environment that we live in. So these perceptions are definitely, they will be different for different people because each one will bring their own experience. The sender's responsibility is that he should be flexible enough to accept the perceptions of other people or the opinion of the other people and not be rigid and try to impose his perception onto others. If he does that, automatically there will be miscommunication in the process. And now let us understand the third type of barrier, that is different background. People belong to different background, and this background could have an influence in the way they communicate, in the way they think, in the way they perceive things. So the sender's responsibility is to understand that people, when they come from different background, are bound to interpret, differently, bound to interpret the information differently. For example, a disabled person will not be able to maybe speak, with so much of clarity as a person who is normal. So therefore, the understanding or the acceptance of these factors could finally lead to effective communication. So the backgrounds could be different based on the age group of the people, the education, how educated they are, and the culture of the particular region that they belong to, and of course the environment. So a proper understanding of all these factors could finally lead to effective communication. So let us understand the next barrier, that is wrong inferences. Inferences are good, but then if these inferences are based on the evidence which appear to be vague, could finally lead to wrong inferences. Or if these inferences are based on evidence that are ambiguous, could finally lead to wrong inferences. And therefore, if this evidence it is insufficient, it can lead to wrong inferences. For example, suppose an employee in an organization is ordered to go for an education tour, and on return, he finds that two of his colleagues, they have not been reporting to the organization. He does not see them, he does not find them. Okay, so therefore, he might draw this inference, he doesn't see them around. He might draw this inference that they have been laid off. But these inferences could be misleading because they are not insufficient evidence to allow him to arrive at this particular conclusion. So when he gathers the accurate information, he understands that his colleagues, they have been shifted to another department, or they have been transferred to another department, and therefore he has not come in contact with them. So this inferences could be quite misleading when we are communicating based on certain vague or insufficient evidence. Let us now move on to the next barrier, that is close-mindedness. Most of the time we observe that we tend to have a closed mind towards certain aspects or towards certain values or towards certain norms that we normally see around us. So for example, it could be in the form of biases. Now these biases are based on the importance that we give to what other people say. So when we give, when we absolutely we believe on what other people say and we tend to react in a similar manner, then of course it becomes a bias, it becomes a wrong belief in our own self. And this belief is not based on factual evidence. So without experiencing certain things, we cannot arrive at any particular conclusion and behave in a very indifferent manner. So these biases are a result of actually result in ineffective communication in the process. Then comes the partiality. When we are partial towards a person or an individual or a group of people, we could, our judgment will not be fair. Our judgment will be, it will be one-sided judgment, and this could definitely create a miscommunication in the process. Again, we can talk about racism. If our judgment is based on the skin color of the person, that could also lead to discrimination amongst the other group of people or the other people around us, and this could finally lead to miscommunication and misinterpretation. Then if we are prejudiced against a particular group of people, that could also result in misinterpretation of information. I would say that in order to overcome all the psychological barriers, it is essential that one tries to, give a serious thought of understanding or identifying that there is a barrier that exists in the communication process. And so we need to identify which barrier is actually, overpowering the process of communication, and this would definitely lead to the sender of the receiver taking proper measures to try and minimize these barriers. So having said this, I would like to move on to the next barrier, that is categorical thinking. Now the categorical thinking occurs when the sender or the receiver could have a feeling that they know all. That is a feeling of overconfidence, and this feeling of overconfidence can lead to stereotyping of people, and of course, it can lead to inaccurate conclusions. This is obviously found in situations where, in an interview situation, for example, when the candidate is overconfident that he is the best person, or he knows all he knows his subject well, he can answer any question, he has more knowledge, or he has acquired enough sufficient knowledge, to interact with people. This kind of overconfidence, can lead to barriers, because the person may not be in a position to pay more attention to what the interviewers are asking him. He might be jumping into conclusions, before even they complete, their question, and thus this would finally land the candidate into a lot of problems. So again, as I told you, these barriers are very difficult to overcome, but we can take the efforts, to minimize these barriers, so that they can actually help us in the communication process, help us to enhance the process of communication. With this, I would like to thank all of you for your patient listening. I would also like to remind you that in my next video, I will be dealing with organizational barriers, and I will also upload a quiz. So kindly complete the quiz or solve the quiz so that you can have a better understanding of of whatever you have heard so far. Thank you once again.